Welcome to the show. I'm so happy that you're here. You're going to be so happy you're here because I have a guest who is going to give you great information, tell some stories. He's so engaging. He's so great. He was actually recommended, highly recommended by a very good friend of mine, Jeffrey, who I trust with my life. And so I know that Michael is a cut above, and I'm so happy that he's here. Michael Cannivet, French. Michael
Both
Cannivet.
work. Both work. Most people
Welcome
say
to the show.
Cannivet, technically Cannivet like Chevrolet, but you can do either one.
Okay, well, welcome to the show. My maiden name is Langlois, and it has an S on the end. And so people always say Langlois, but whatever. Anyway, yes, I get it. We got the French thing going, you and I. So here we
Yeah, I'll
go.
take exotic names over, some Jones or Smith name. No offense to those people, but it's yeah, at least our name stands out a little bit.
You know what's kind of funny, sort of this weird tangent sidebar, but when I was in high school, I was a very mature dater, and I had a couple of goals in mind with somebody that I would date. They had to be over 6 foot tall because my 5 foot nothing mom married a short man. I wanted to give my kids a chance if I ever had kids. And he had to be good looking because I wanted him to look good in my wedding pictures. And he had to have a great last name.
Ah, well,
And
that is important, right? When you think
I
about it, like where's the relationship going to go if they have like a terrible last name? I don't know.
Exactly. So yeah, and so I won. I mean, I got all three, and my husband. So it all worked out. But yes, obviously, very deep thinker, very very important things to have in a man. But so
Cool.
Michael, anyway, welcome to the show. Great last name. So you're a Forbes contributor, you're an author, you are a financial guru, but you've done a lot, but I would love people to get to know you. Like tell me about you, about growing up, about life.
Sure. Well, I'll start when I was pretty young then. I think I'm in many ways the product of my grandparents. They raised me along with my parents, but my grandparents put a lot of extra effort into teaching me certain lessons when I was young. For instance, every time I go to lunch with my grandmother, we played a game where she'd have me repeat this phrase over and over again. I want to increase my vocabulary so that I may speak more intelligently. And then she'd teach me a word, and a lot of times they were financial words actually. So she taught me to speak about stocks and bonds at a very elementary level when I was only 7 or 8 years old. I think that planted the seeds that led to me eventually becoming a money manager, just because I always felt like it was a topic that was accessible to me. I was never intimidated by finance. I always found it kind of interesting because my grandmother linked finance to living a good life in my mind. She was really big about, you got to do well in school so you can get a good job, so you can make enough money to live a good life. And then you got to do smart things with your money because a fool and their money will soon part, is one of her sayings that she drilled into my head too. So I really traced my career and where I am as an adult back to my childhood and the core values that were bestowed upon me by my grandparents mainly. Then I went to college at Georgetown University, studied government, thought I wanted to do something on Capitol Hill or maybe be a lawyer or something. But then I found an internship at a venture capital firm that really changed my life. One of my big pieces of advice to young people is just do as many internships as you can and don't be afraid to dabble in different areas because you might find something you're really passionate about. That's what happened to me. I'm really glad I didn't become a lawyer. My wife's a lawyer. Good for the lawyers out there, but watching her go through law school, I realized that was not going to be for me. I found a much better path for myself. And I love investing because it traces throughout my life as something I've always been interested in. I collected baseball cards as a kid, tried to pick which cards would do better or worse, haggle with the dealers at card shows. That's kind of like what I do today too. Just I'm haggling with the market, trying to figure out what the best deals are for my clients when I invest in certain things. So I've had a career about 20 years now in the industry. I worked at Fisher Investments before I founded my firm. They're the biggest registered investment advisory firm in the US. Probably see their commercials if you ever watch CNBC or anything like that. And I work for Ken Fisher there. He's the founder, CEO, wonderful man, taught me a lot. And then I started my firm a few years back, and now I'm growing my own firm.
That's that great story. That's a great story. I love it that your grandparents were so involved in your life. And I love that your grandma wanted to expand your vocabulary and teach you about money and all the stuff. But it's making me feel like I'm falling short with my grandkids as they're getting older because I don't have something like that I'm doing like I should be, I guess. What a genius of a woman. Like I admire that a lot. That's
Well,
cool.
I honored her and my grandpa in my book. I wrote about them a fair amount just in terms of the key values that they taught me. But whether, somebody subscribes to my values or their values or different sets of values that you may have learned from different people that were important to you, one of my key messages is just share your values, especially with kids or grandkids, because when they're young, their brains are most malleable. So like 0 to 8, we're like a sponge, and we're forming all of our impressions about the world, and a lot of our core identity takes shape during those years. So if you have a grandkid that's, 0 to 8, that's a really good time to try to teach them stuff. It doesn't mean you can't teach them stuff as they get older. It's just the lessons won't stick quite as well and they won't make as big of an impression. But one of the things my wife says that I really like is kids spell love Time. So if you just spend time with your kids, you can lead by example. You don't have to make it a class or have a special saying like my grandmother did. She was really gung ho about it, I suppose, but she did it in a fun way, and that's what I think made those lessons stick for me.
Yeah, that's so great. And I love that. Love spelled Time. I think about when I was a young mom and had all these kids, my four biological kids, my oldest was 4.5 when my fourth one was born. So it was insanity in my house.
Yeah.
And time is something I never felt like I had. There was always a mountain of laundry. There was always dinner to be made. There was always somebody dirty that needed a bath. I mean, it was just constant everything, everything. And looking back, I mean, that is my biggest regret is that I didn't spend the time that I'm able to spend with my grandkids just sitting on the floor doing a puzzle or reading a book or, I read books to my kids, but not near enough. And so, yes, time is your greatest asset and you can't buy any more of it. So use it wisely and who cares if the house is a mess and the laundry will get done. Just spend the time with your kids, spend the time with your grandkids. It's such great advice. I love that, Michael. So already we're just into the show and you've already dropped some terrific advice for people. So here you are, you're in the financial world. You're a father, you're a husband, you've got a couple sons, right? How old are your kids?
13 and 9.
13 and 9. Oh my gosh, so fun. So fun. Every age is fun. Every
They
age.
really are. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, now it's fun because I can do more things with them. Like I coached my kids' middle school basketball team the last 2 years, and that was just outrageously fun. And I felt a little bit pressured when I took that on because I have pressures on my time too, right? I know exactly what you mean. It's really hard raising kids. In fact, one of the things I talk about in my book is this thing called the happiness curve. It's a smile basically, and what the theory is, and it's been proven through a lot of different studies looking at different cultures, even different primates, if you can believe that. They find that happiness tends to start to go down when you're about 25, tends to trough around 45 or 50. Then most people tend to get happier as they get older. 60s, 70s, it keeps curving up. And that's not really consistent with how we think about aging. Most people think about aging as something they want to avoid, or, I'm not going to look as good, or my body won't be the same, or maybe I'll get sick. And there's all these negative associations. But the interesting thing is people are happier as they get older. Maybe it's because we're more comfortable in our own skin, or maybe there's some other reasons for it. But it's hard when you're raising kids. It's hard when you're in the middle of life and you've got all these pressures on your time. And so I spend a lot of time in my book trying to help people prioritize how they spend their time, because I do think that's the most sacred asset we have. Our time is something we can use in the form of our human capital that we deploy in our career. That's our earning power, and the goal of wealth management is to earn as much as you can and then turn that into financial capital that you can use to live a better life over time and hopefully leave a meaningful legacy. But it's hard for all of us because we're all dealing with so many different pressures on our time, so many external influences trying to tell us what to believe or who we should be. So it's important to take time out sometimes, even when you're busy, and just look at the big picture, think about what really matters to you, and that's how you manage what I call our emotional assets and our emotional liabilities. Those are things related to the time perspective curve. We can bend that curve earlier in life if we actively manage our time. But the only way to actively manage your time is to really prioritize the things that matter to you, whether that be your core values, your happiness triggers. And these aren't really terms that are thrown around very much in my industry. A lot of people like to talk about esoteric things like benchmarks and Sharpe ratios and a lot of stuff that most people just tune out because it's a foreign language they don't want to know or understand. But everyone wants to live a better life. And so my quest as a money manager is to help people do that by helping them, build and protect their capital and then use it in ways to live a better life.
I like that. I like that. So you do it with heart. So you're not just doing it. It's not just a job for you. You obviously love what you're doing. And then you also care about the people that you're working with. So you're like the perfect combination. I think when people look for some sort of financial planner, somebody that's going to be handling their assets in any way, it can be a little scary. Like, you ask for people to tell you who they know or whatever, because you want someone who you can trust and who's going to do right by you, and you're going to be okay, and your money's going to do something or whatever it is. And you seem like, or I know that you are, Michael, that guy. You're that guy that people recommend. You're that guy that people want to go to because of your attitude. It's not just a job. I think of so many people who are unhappy at work. There's a quote I read recently that uh, um, something about work being fun. My most fun is at work, kind of thing. Like, a lot of people's most fun is on vacation, but when you're on vacation, you're really just revving up to get back to work if you really enjoy your job and really enjoy what you're doing. And that's the way to live, man. I love what I do. And so you love what you do. So you go on vacation and it's great with the kids, but you get to come back and have more fun. Everything can be fun. So your smile is probably a little more straight lined than a lot of people smile without the great big dip in the middle.
Well, but I learned that the hard way. I did have a dip, right? I had my own adversity I had to overcome. And so I spent a lot of time studying psychology and trying to integrate that into my practice as best I can. I appreciate all the kind words. That was very nice of you. I do think there needs to be more heart in this business. This is an industry that does not evolve very quickly. If you look at the amount of innovation in the financial sector over the last 100 years compared to technology or healthcare, or a lot of other things, it's pretty sad. I mean, there's not a whole lot of innovation in finance. But one of the most simple things that I think everyone should strive for is how do we better link wealth with well-being? Because I've met a lot of rich people in my 20 years doing this, and there's no correlation I can see between how much money they have and how happy they are. I've had clients that are the fabulously wealthy, the centimillionaires, and they still get up grouchy in a given day over something in their portfolio or life that's bugging them. And then I have people that are, much lower on the wealth spectrum that just, they kind of exude positivity like you do. And that's what it means to be wealthy. It means to live a rich life, in my opinion. Having more money gives you more choices for how you can help people and yourself live a better life. You can craft a richer mosaic of things in your life if you have more capital available to you. But at the end of the day, like, you got to use that money in ways that serve you. And that's just something that I do think we need to reconfigure in a lot of ways. So that's why the first third of my book is how to write the story behind your financial plan. Because I learned the hard way that it's not just about numbers, it's also about finding the right narrative. If you want to live a good life and be fulfilled, you need to figure out what are the core ingredients of the story of your life that make you feel rich, that make you feel good about yourself. And you need to pursue goals that are directly linked to those core values that you diagnose. And that's something I learned the hard way, but it's something I think everybody needs to learn as best they can. And if I can help with that, then it's a fun job because you're riding shotgun with your clients and the journey of their life. I mean, being a financial advisor is a lot of fun. It can be stressful at times, right? I mean, when the market gets really scary, my whole job in those moments is to be calm and collected and not make those emotional decisions the clients might otherwise make that hurt themselves. So there's some tough moments at here or there. People get sick or have their own adversities, and you have to kind of coach them through those tough periods of their life. But for the most part, it's fun and gratifying doing what I do.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I love the way you talk about people's stories, that it's not just a one size fits all, but what is it that you're looking for? What is it that you want? I think it was Dale Carnegie maybe that said you spend the first half of your life making money and the second half of your life giving it away. And so, I always think the more I have, the more I can give, the more I can do to help people. And so I'm sure that's what drives some people. Leaving a big legacy probably drives some people. There's probably other things that drive people. But how would you look, how do you do that? How do you look at things differently depending on people's stories?
Sure. So I think one of the most important things to distinguish with when you work with a client like I do is what are their goals and objectives and how are we going to measure success? For instance, some people have a goal when they hire a money manager that's very numeric. They just want to beat a benchmark like the S&P 500 or the Dow or whatever other benchmark they may have. And that's called a relative return focused goal. And that's, how a lot of institutions hire money managers and evaluate them. And it's all numbers for the most part. And that's fine. But very few of my clients think like that. Most of my clients are trying to solve the riddles of their life, and they're all different. So I think the number one thing I try to do when I'm getting to know a new client is figure out what are the parts of their past that we should preserve going forward. Meaning, what are the really good foundations that we can help them build a better life with going forward? Because I think it's important to have a financial plan. I specialize in investing. I'm a portfolio manager by trade, but I learned a number of years ago that without a financial plan, an investment plan doesn't really always have the right compass, because most people don't just want to beat a benchmark like the S&P. They want to fund their life goals that they care about. And they need help figuring out what those most important goals are. And they also need help framing those goals in ways that inspire them. Because if you talk to anybody on a given day and you ask, what are your financial goals? You might get different answers if they haven't thought deeply about it. They might give you one answer on one day, and then the next day it's something totally different. And it's just because they're so busy in their life, they haven't taken time out to really properly think about these things. And another thing I tell people is it's important not to have too many goals. A lot of people who create a financial plan, for instance, they might have 5 or 6 different goals over different time horizons. That's really complicated to not only model, but just to keep track of in your own mind. I think if you have 3 really important goals, one that's kind of short term, one that's medium term. So let's call it the first short term goal might be a 1 to 5 year goal. The second one might be a 5 to 10 year goal. And if you have a long term goal, let's say 10 years plus, and they're all goals that you can link to core values that are true to you. You can create a goal that is not just a bland goal, like I'm going to retire at 65, for instance. That's a common one. And it's emotionally hollow. And what I tell people is that hollow goals produce shallow outcomes. If you want to have a really great outcome in your life, you need to think of a rich goal. And the richness comes from how it's personalized to you, why it's something you can bank on. If you achieve it, it's going to make you happier. And if you can come up with just 3 of those, that's a really good starting point. And then you got to figure out 2 things. How much do I need to save over time to fund this goal on time? And how much do I need to earn on my investments to fund this goal on time? And it's important to have a few different over different time horizons, because that's the way we are as human beings. None of us have just one priority or one goal long term. If you want to retire someday and you're 30 something, that's great, but you might want to buy a house first, and that's a more pressing concern, right? Or maybe you're in your 40s and your kid's going to go to college soon. I got that. My kid went to his first shadow day at high school yesterday. My little Nick, he's in 8th grade. He's getting ready to go to high school, and I can't believe we have to pay for college in 4 years, but I know how much it costs, and it's going to cost a lot. And I got to worry about that goal before I'm going to retire someday, whenever that may be. So everybody's like that, right? We have different priorities over different times. We have to kind of synthesize what are the most important priorities over each time scale. And then once we know what those goals are, Kim, we can reverse engineer the numbers really easily. That's not the hard part. Something I tell people sometimes is a better way to think about it is imagine, what makes a great movie in Hollywood? Is it the finance department? Not really. No, I don't think the finance department gets a credit, but they're not usually the most influential, right? The writers, the directors, the actors, and then you need a finance department to produce the movie on time and on budget. so that it makes its way out into the world. But the thing that makes the movie great is the story behind it. And that's how we should think about our financial plans. It's the story behind them that's really the rich part. And the numbers are just, that's the easy part. That's, let the finance department handle that.
Wow, that's so interesting. You just delivered so much in just a couple minutes. But I've never thought of it that way before, Michael, that until I read your book. But I never thought of it that way, that it does have to do with your story. And yes, my goal is to retire at 65, whatever number you put to it, is pretty hollow. To retire at 65 for what? Like where's the depth? Like, why do you want to retire at 65, right? Like, what will it do for you to retire at 65? And what do you want it to do for you? And
Yeah, I mean, the word retire is just an uninspiring word. Do you know what the dictionary definition is? It's to
what is,
withdraw. Do
oh,
you want to withdraw from life at 65? I don't. I
mm,
don't find much, to be excited about in that type of a visual or scene in a movie. Withdrawing is depressing. That's not what anybody wants. These people should keep growing until their last breath. I mean, if we're not moving forward in our life, we're not happy. That's one thing I've learned about psychology. It's kind of like sharks. They can't survive unless they're swimming forward, and they can't breathe if they stop swimming forward. And our psychology is similar. We got to keep growing, keep striving for new things. And the moment we stop doing that, we're guaranteed to be unhappy and unsettled. We can have all the money in the world and it won't matter. So that's why it's great to have goals that you can keep pursuing that are true to you and inspirational. But you want to use your resources at any age to keep living a better life, in my opinion. And sometimes if you get stuck in a certain point where it's hard to figure out what those new things should be, that's where an advisor or a friend even can be of help. Anybody that knows the story you want to tell that you can bounce things off of can be a wonderful resource in your life. But you got to be able to share your story with people. You got to know what your story is yourself. A lot of people are just passively floating through life, reacting to things. They're not proactively managing anything. And once we stop doing that, that's when we're going to be at the nadir of the happiness curve, because no one wants to live a life where they don't feel like they have their own sovereignty over their time. I mean, you own your life, and you want to make the most of that every day, I'm sure.
yeah, well, it's interesting because I think you're right. I think that there are people that are more just existing or just settled with the day to day and not really looking at the future, or not having big goals. And I think sometimes it's because people don't realize don't realize that they're able to. But we all have what it takes to be able to set goals and strive for them. And if you don't have a goal, you're not striving towards something, then you're never going to reach what a goal might look like. Like you need to know. So for the people that are listening, Michael, that have never really thought about goal setting, what would you say? Like, what are the first steps, or what should they do? How should they look at their life maybe a little bit differently and realize the value of goals?
Sure. I think it's very important. You don't need to have a ton of goals. You just need to have a few that you're excited about when you wake up in the morning. So what I encourage people to do is, do a little brainstorming. And the best way to build a compelling future is to preserve your past. Because if you look at your past, you can diagnose a lot of different themes that you can take and bring into the present and future of your life to live a better life. For instance, if you think back to when you were growing up, three different ages at any point in your life, actually, when you were really happy, really on track, really felt good about who you were, where you were going, everything was just kind of flowing well. Yeah, I don't care. Everybody's got different backgrounds, but everybody's got some happy times they can focus on if they try to. So you drill into those times and you try to diagnose, what was I doing, who was I with, and you can sometimes diagnose your core values from that. And you can contrast it to if you take 3 periods in your life when you didn't feel on track, when you felt lonely, you felt depressed, or you felt unmotivated. Where were you? Who were you around? What were you doing? And there's a page in my book that has like the top 20 core values that are most commonly shared across American society. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's a pretty good starting point. So I encourage people to like look at that list, think about the times in their life when they were happy and sad, and try to figure out if there's values on that list or some new ones they can think of where they put it in their own words even, that just, you know, embody the happy times but weren't relevant in the bad times. That's how you find a core value. For instance, I grew up with a big family. I come from a family of like over 30 first cousins who were always together on the weekends and every holiday at my grandparents' house. And my mom has 7 brothers and sisters. So all my aunts and uncles lived in the Chicago suburbs when I was growing up. And I was around family a lot. And those were happy times for me. Later in life, you know, I moved to California with my wife to start a new life, and my family lives all over the country now in different places. And since my grandparents have passed, my family core dynamic is kind of dissipated. And I recognized when I was writing the book that, you know, family is actually one of my top core values, if not the top core value. It's actually the most common one in society. And I wouldn't have said that if you would have asked me a few years ago, like, you know, where does family rank on your priorities? I'd say, of course, it's important, but I wouldn't have identified it as something that is like a core value. And what I mean by core value is I know now that there's not a single time in my life where I've ever been happy and thriving when my family is not a key part of it.
Mhm.
And the times in my life when I've been upset or felt like depressed in any way, shape, or form, family's not been around. I haven't been as close. There's been different periods where I've gotten disagreements with people, or we just don't talk to each other as much. And now I recognize that like I can never let that happen again, because it's key to my happiness to be well connected to my family. So I organized a big cousins reunion recently. Like every summer, all my cousins and hopefully the rest of the family will do a family reunion, because I want to maintain that. And I realized all my cousins, when I reached out to them and explained this, they all feel the same way. They miss their family. And that's the thing with the core value. It's something that never really leaves you. It's always part of your identity. So you never want to try to change someone. If you're with a spouse or something, you know, you got to honor their core values. You never want to try to change those parts of them, or it just won't work. And it's the same for yourself. You need to sometimes safeguard yourself from people that try to violate your core values. Because if you're not actively managing it, you sometimes neglect these things, and that leads to the hollow goals that produce the shallow outcomes, and where you don't want to be on the happiness curve.
Interesting. Yeah, what a great way to look at it and analyze it. And it's so true, because family, it really, life in general is all about relationships. It's all about other people. And I think especially since COVID and people working at home, it can be so easy to withdraw from people. And if you think about how you feel when you're withdrawn from people compared to when you're engaged and when you're hanging out with friends or with family, and provided you like your family, I guess, but hopefully you do. But it's a whole different feeling. It's a whole different life when people are involved in it as compared to being isolated. And I think I read recently that there was a study done, and over 50% of Americans feel very lonely. Very, not just lonely, very lonely. Like lonely is an issue for them. Over 50% of people. And so I like what you said. Yeah, probably on a lot of people's scale, family relationships of whatever kind would be at the top, and should be, because
Yeah, I
we're
mean, for me, like, I don't ever want to retire. I want to be financially free so I can spend as much time as I want traveling the world with my family. Like that's an inspirational goal for me, right? And I still probably want to work, maybe just not as much at some point, right? But like you said, if work is play, why would you want to withdraw from that, right?
right,
So it's not
right.
about retirement, you know. I'm really big about renewal. Every day is a new opportunity to wake up again and start over more intelligently. So it's why it's important to keep learning and keep growing and keep learning from other people. Like, you're so right. I mean, the loneliness epidemic is a big part of why you see so many surveys about people are depressed or not feeling like the future is going to be as good as the past. All these negative things you see on social media and in the media. A lot of it is just that basic human connection that's lacking. It's a real significant risk in retirement. A lot of people that are unhappy in retirement, it's because they're lonely. I tell the story of one woman who tried retiring in her 70s, 80s, and 90s, but every time she's tried to retire, she's come out of retirement because she misses her coworkers. And she's over 100 now, and she works at a fabric store. And she's got some run-of-the-mill job, but she's just doing the job to be around the people there because it's her friend circle. And she's even started a TikTok video channel with one of the younger employees to impart wisdom to her followers. She's this 100-year-old woman who's still working, but it's not work, it's play, and that's something that young people can learn from too. If you're not happy in your job, which, like you said, a lot of people aren't. I think 20% or so, I saw a recent survey, hate their job, and about 60% are emotionally detached from their work. Well, if that's the case, I get that you want a paycheck and all that, but don't be afraid to do something different. Even if that means taking a short-term step back in your income, it's worth it in the long run because the story of our lives is long and meandering, right? Hopefully. And you don't always have to be moving forward inch by inch. Sometimes you take a step back to get recentered on something that you're passionate about, but that helps you take a bigger leap forward. And that's something that I had to do, in my own journey. When I started my company, it wasn't because I planned to be an entrepreneur. It's because I got fired from my previous job. And that was after I had been there for 7 years, helped the firm grow nearly 500%, had a track record. I was the top 1% equity manager versus my peer group. So I thought I was succeeding on paper. We were succeeding as a team on paper, growing the firm. And one day I got a pink slip, despite all the numbers being so good, because the narrative between me and my partner was off. We couldn't openly talk about our succession plan without lawyers in the room and stuff. And that wasn't by my design. That's the way he thought about it. And so because we weren't having honest conversations with each other or ourselves about what we really wanted, I had a real tough fork in the road. And I was not sure what to do when that happened because I was the sole breadwinner. I had little kids at the time. My wife was staying home with them, and I had a mortgage to pay. And I looked at my income being, from really good to zero overnight. And that was scary, but it got even scarier because even though I decided to start my own business after about a week of contemplating things, a month later, the same partner sued me because clients were voluntarily following me to my new firm. That was a real tough riddle because now I'm not just dealing with the lower income than I used to have, but I got maybe six-figure legal bills I'm staring at as well. I'll never forget sitting in my office staring at the spreadsheet, and the financial analyst in me said, "Michael, these numbers are scary. It's time to wave the white flag and go get another job. You don't need to be an entrepreneur if it means risking bankruptcy or something," because I had emergency savings, but I didn't know how long this legal crap was going to draw on. And my partner had a lot more money than me, and it was all a financial pressure move on his part. But then I thought about the story of my life, Kim, and I thought about, like, in 10 or 15 years, maybe I was sure I could go get another high paying job. But I felt like I'd always look back at this period of my life and feel like a victim from this period if I waved the white flag. And so, it was a real big step back for me. And the only reason I was able to do that is because I saw my life in a bigger picture sense. I thought about myself as an older man in the future, looking back on this period, and I didn't want to have regrets. So I figured, you know what, if I can manage money well, and I know I can, and clients like working with me, I need to just gut this out and it'll be worth it in the long run, because then I'll at least be proud of myself for how I handled this period. I didn't let somebody bully me out of my dream of having my own company. And so it was the story, the narrative is what pulled me through that period and got me to a place now where, my company's worth a lot more money than any of the money that I had to spend on the legal bills. And all that legal stuff actually worked out in my favor because we went to trial after I countersued him and I won my attorney's fees.
Oh, nice.
So I won in court. I still have my business. And if I would have just paid attention to numbers and fear, none of it would have happened. I'd be a victim today in my own mind. And I don't want anybody to ever fall into that trap. It's a dangerous trap that's really easy to fall into once adversity strikes. But we're also strong if we realize that we're not just the actors in the movie of our life, we're also the directors and the writers. And every good movie or story has, guess what? Ups and downs, right? So we don't have to be as afraid of the adversity if we know we can get through it. And the way we develop that courage is by testing ourselves. When the tough times come along, don't try to hide or run from it. Just reevaluate your core values and make the best decisions you can in those moments to be proud of yourself in the future, independent of the outcome. If you live your life that way, you'll be rich.
Yeah, it's a whole different ball game. And good for you, Michael. Good for you for sticking it out and being where you are today and making it happen. Because I think it can be so difficult when you are in the thick of it, when you're in the weeds,
Yeah.
and it's hard to see over the top. It's hard to see anything in the future. So I love the idea of looking at your whole life and realize that this is a momentary setback. Like this is a moment in your life. I've lived a lot of years, a lot more than you have. And I look back at things, you kind of talked about it earlier, back at things that were the hardest times in my life that really were the things that shaped me the most.
Yeah.
And there are so many times that you come to that fork in the road, you come to this crossroad where you're like, I can go one way or the other. And it can be really tough to pick the way you really want to go and really easy to go the other way. But sometimes tough needs to win out. Tough can be the better way to go. And so, yeah, great story and great way to look at it, to just look at your whole life. I think if people come to a certain age, I've seen often in my life, and they do kind of stop growing. Like they're sad, and this is what I believe. This is the truth right here. This is what I believe. That's the truth. And you're not going to change my mind. I don't want to have a conversation about it. Like that, I know that this is and develop that at whatever age, and then stick with it. And it's like, man, I hope that I'm always open to learning. I hope
Yeah.
that I'm always open to other people's opinions, and why do people, ask the question, why do you believe the way you believe? Why are you set on that? Why is that your goal? What is important to you, instead of the fighting, the bickering that happens between political parties and other things that separate us.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, no, I mean there's so many things you can get hung up on there, but it's just important to stay true to who you are and stay true to what you want to pursue in your life, and don't let others bully you into anything different in terms of your story.
Right, right. And don't be fear driven, I think is another thing. If you watch a lot of news, or you watch what's going on in our world today, what's going on with the election, whatever it happens to be at any given moment in time, it can be easy to choose fear over happiness.
Yeah,
And I just believe when you are living in fear, it's awfully hard, if not impossible, to be happy. And
yeah. And it's
and
okay to change your mind, like you said. That's actually one of the traits that distinguishes the best money managers. It's you have to have a fluidity in your impressions of things, because you got to admit you're wrong. That's one of the things I love about being a money manager is I'm always learning, and you'd probably be a good money manager, at least from your temperament, because you think that way naturally, it sounds like. But yeah, you should always be updating your opinions on things, because there's very few hard and fast facts that we know to be true about the world. There's a lot of subjective opinions, and they float around like air. They're everywhere. But we have to keep being open minded, I think is what you're saying. I totally agree.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a different way to live, to be open-minded,
Yeah.
and at every age. And instead of going, well, now I'm in my 60s, and now I know it all, because here I am. That I don't. I mean, I feel like the older I get, the more I realize how little I know, how much more there is to know, right? And so to have somebody like you in my corner, in somebody's corner, what a blessing is that, to have somebody that you know and trust, and know that you have somebody's best interest at heart, that you are going to help them figure out their story, and not be empty in their goals, but actually have goals that are going to make them happy, things to look forward to. I think that's a lot of it, is instead of fear. Fear is the fear of the unknown, fear of the future that may or may not ever happen.
Right,
And
exactly.
right.
And so when we live in fear, sometimes there's two types of fear. I mean, there's the present fear, like, you get startled because someone yells fire in a theater or something like that. And in that kind of the instance, your fear, your survival mechanism is probably a good thing to listen to. It can keep you alive, right? So in the very short term, it can be beneficial because it keeps us going through tough things that may be threats. But the other types of fear, when you're living in past negative or future negative thoughts. One of the things I write about in the book is this thing called time perspective. And because the way I discovered that is I thought a lot about the fact that I made the biggest financial decisions of my life based on my narrative, not the numbers. And so I wanted to teach people how to write a story for themselves behind their financial plan in my book. And it occurred to me that, it's not enough to just tell people to write a story. I mean, if you think about what is a story, there's a very conventional form for most stories. It's called the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell is known for this, but basically you could chunk it down to 3 acts: a setup, a challenge, and a resolution. The setup in a story is like when you're watching the movie and you're introduced to who the lead character is, like what drives them, what are their values, where are they in their life. That's the setup. Then there's the challenge that they usually face, right? The Karate Kid, like Ralph Macchio had to take on the Cobra Kai bullies. One of my favorite movies when I was a kid was Karate Kid. Or you could, Star Wars, Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader. There's always a challenge, right? In any movie or story that the hero has to overcome. And then there's a resolution. That's how they live happily ever after. And so I think you can take that general framework and apply it to your own life to build your own story. And this is going to be helpful outside of financial stuff. I mean, I think it's a great down payment on a much more healthy and holistic financial plan, but it's a good life exercise too to do this. So, like, think of yourself, if you're the hero of the story, and you better be, because if you're not the hero of your own story, then you're undershooting yourself and you're not being your own best friend. A lot of people are not the hero of their own story because they're too caught in past negative or fear, like you said, or and when you're anchored to negative things that have happened in the past, they're like chains. They make it hard to move forward. And so if you're future negative and you're biased in how you think about time, you're more likely to be future fatalistic as well. Like you'll have a victim mentality. Oh, it never works out for me, or whatever I do, I can't get ahead, or all these negative stories that sometimes people tell. They're usually remnants from their past that have made them think that way. But the good news, Kim, is you can actively manage your time perspective, and you can do it with your story. In fact, the story is the best vehicle for it. And what I mean by that is, if you think back to the happy times in your life and you really shine a spotlight there, I'm not saying pretend that the negative stuff never happened, but don't let yourself dwell on it. It does nothing good for you. It makes your body go right back into the scene of that movie, and your body absorbs the stress all over again, like you're living through it all over again. I learned this the hard way when I was getting ready for my trial. I had to do a month of trial prep. Every night and weekend I spent with my lawyers trying to go over all the crappy stuff that happened. It was part of our trial. And reviewing that negative stuff over and over again physically made me sick. It emotionally made me sick, but also physically made me sick. My skin started shedding. Okay. I got sick from it. And I only got better when I didn't have to go through trial prep anymore. Like, trial prep was terrible. But what it taught me was that, oh my gosh, like, people do versions of that every day. They maybe are just, they're not preparing for a trial, but maybe they're stuck in on some negative issue that happened in the past. They keep replaying in their mind. Somebody double crossed them, somebody fired them, somebody got sick and died, somebody did something else wrong to you, or whatever happened. And when we get stuck in that mode of thinking, shortchange our lives. So the best time zones to live in, if you think from a time perspective angle, are future positive, past positive, and present hedonistic. So that's basically, you're replaying the positive memories of your past more than the negative ones. And if you want to see how you're conditioned in this regard, because we're all different in how we operate in the different time zones, I'd encourage you to take something called the time perspective inventory. You can find that online. Dr. Philip Zimbardo from Stanford is the one who came up with time perspective about 20 years ago. I've taken what put together as an amazing framework, and I've combined it with storytelling in my book, because I feel like that's the real basis to write a healthy story that empowers you long term towards a compelling future. And if you're not in a healthy time perspective zone now, there's a lot of little things you can do. I talk about some tips in my book about how you can improve your time perspective, because this is something we can actively manage if we're aware of it. And that's the really great thing about it. The happiness curve is not something that anybody has to be passively hostage to. We can all improve our well-being and be more successful and happy if we're conscious of how we think about time and how we frame it.
Hmm. Oh my gosh, I love that. I mean, such wisdom, and it's so true, because at any point in life, you get to write your narrative. You get to say how you feel about things, how you accept things. If you're going to move forward, whatever you're going to do, you get to pick.
Yeah.
And even if in your past you've lived a whole different way, you got a whole future ahead. There's all this time ahead that you might as well make great. Like I had grandparents who fought all the time. And I remember having my grandma over as a young adult, a young mom, saying, Grandma, leave the guy. Like, you are so unhappy. All you guys do is fight. Like, either go to a marriage counselor or, figure out how to be happy or walk away. But this is ugly. I mean, it was in front of everybody. It was all the time. And they stayed together and they fought till they died. And I just thought, man, I think at the time she was probably maybe 60 years old, and she was thinking that she couldn't walk away, or she couldn't change things. Like, it's too late. We've been in this too long, or 70, however old. But it's never too late. It's never too late to write your own story and to live in the positive and happy. And you've given us so much great information. I just really appreciate you a lot. I appreciate everything that you've said today. How can people find you? Because everyone's going to want to. So tell us how can people find you?
Sure. Well, you can go to my website, michaelcannivet.com, Cannivet, or you can go to silverlight.us. That's our corporate website. And you can also follow me on Forbes if you want. I've been writing for Forbes since 2017. That's a good way to follow me.
All right. And the name of your book and where to find your book?
The 4-Minute Retirement Plan. It's available on the most popular bookstore on the planet, Amazon, but also Target, Barnes & Noble, wherever you want to shop. So that's yeah.
That's good. And it is really a great book. And it's just full of just great practical advice that takes you from where you are today to a much better place. And even if you're happy in life, this is a great book to read, because I know you'll get stuff out of it that you didn't know. And I appreciate you taking the time to write it and everything that you did. I appreciate you being here today, Michael. This has been so fun. This hour has just gone by way too fast. And so I just want to say thank you for that. If you were to say, you know what, before we go, Kim, I've got one piece of dynamite advice, that maybe something you can do financially for your kids, financially for yourself, what would that one piece of advice be?
I would say look at your skills as an asset. That's one thing I talk about in the book. For like one of the challenges with retirement planning books is that retirement's a really long race. It starts when you get your first paycheck. It really never ends, because even when you're retired, you're still kind of actively managing your legacy if you're doing it right, in my opinion. So it's like this infinite race. But when you're young, I think a lot of people make financial decisions based on numbers and not the narrative. So if you focus on your skills as an asset, that's a good way, or if you're early in your career or even later in your career, just to make sure that you don't become obsolete, because everyone's scared nowadays of AI taking their jobs. Even what I do is like under threat. And this is not something anyone should be afraid of, because progress requires innovation. Sorry about that. And I think that if you build diverse skills, that's kind of a way to hedge your career risk. And it's also a good way to make sure you can always find a job that you like.
Mm.
So for instance, I tell the story about, if you're let's say, a personal trainer. It's good to be a personal trainer if you know how to work out. That's a great starting point for most people that do that. But it's even better if you also know a lot about nutrition. And let's say maybe you're a really good marketing guru on social media. If you're good at marketing on social media, you can do nutrition and you help people work out. You've got three different skills you're combining to be a more attractive value proposition for potential clients. You're going to be more likely to be successful and thrive in that if you have multiple ways to win. And a lot of people nowadays are very specialized in one thing. And so I think it's change is coming quicker than ever. That's not going to stop. So I think having multiple skills, if you're a good writer, it's great if you're a speaker too. If are a good business owner, it's good if you understand like how to manage people and products. Like, you got to just diversify your skills. And if you do that, I think the money will come. And then there's a lot of people like me that can help you do something intelligent with it.
Yeah, the great advice. Great advice. Again, Michael, thank you so much for being here. Look up Michael, get in touch with him. You will be happy that you did. I appreciate it so much, Michael. And I appreciate you joining us today and being here today. And until next time, be blessed.